Hello, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Demystifying Money podcast. I'm your host, Misty Lynch, and today I'm joined by Julia Bocchese. She is the founder of Julia Renee Consulting, where she empowers entrepreneurs, especially business owners, within entrepreneur organizations to elevate their visibility, attract more clients, and increase revenue through strategic SEO, purposeful copy, and compelling user experience. I'm excited to talk about this topic today because it's something that I don't really understand. And I'll admit that as a business owner with a website, SEO, ranking on Google, all of these things that I know are very important to attract your ideal clients is something that I really, the behind the scenes end of it is something that I've never really quite understood how it works. So I'm excited to talk with Julia today about this and how all of us can benefit and have more people see our businesses and hopefully attract more clients and more money into our offices. So thank you so much, Julia, for joining me today.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, most of my clients come to me, they're like, I don't know what SEO is, but I know I need it.
Yeah.
So I'm always happy to talk about SEO, answer lots of questions because I know
Yeah, no,
it can be
I
a
think
confusing
at
topic.
first it would be wonderful if you could
Mhm.
what is SEO? For anybody
Yeah.
listening that is like, I know that I don't even know what that stands for. What is
Mhm.
SEO and how important is it when it comes to online business or working with
Mhm.
websites and design?
Yeah, so SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. This applies to all search engines, Google and Bing and Yahoo and everything. Most people in the US focus on Google because, they
Mhm.
kind of like set the rules that people follow by to, rank higher on Google. So the SEO is basically just the practice of making sure Google is able to crawl and understand what to rank your website for. So that way you can show up for the right types of searches and then, yeah, show up for the types of searches that your clients are searching for in order to get more leads and yeah, make more money with your business.
That's It's important because I think all of us we're familiar, even if it's not using it on the business end, but we all are going to Google or going to the internet to search
Mhm.
for things before we even will think about making a phone call or scheduling a meeting or, I think that's usually our first step. So I think it's super important. I know a lot of people do spend a lot of money on their websites, but if people aren't seeing it or finding it when they're going looking for that thing that they need that you offer, you can have the most beautiful website on the planet and it won't necessarily do anything for you because people aren't seeing it. So I think it's really important for everybody. Like having a website is good, but there are certain things about it that need to be optimized. So I think that's kind of what I'd love to talk about next is well, first kind of what inspired you to start this business and focus so heavily on
Mhm.
SEO and user experience for business owners
Mhm.
as a business itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started, I launched a travel photography blog over 10 years ago and kind of just learned, different marketing techniques for that, SEO and Facebook and Instagram and everything. And then I was, getting ready to quit my corporate job because I actually wanted to go to grad school to study history with focus on the Viking Age. So I wanted a flexible
Mhm.
schedule. And so when I did quit my job, I was doing a lot of freelance and like content writing for small businesses. And I was using the SEO practices that I learned for my own website. And the businesses started to see a lot more, growth on Google, but weren't understanding like why all of a sudden they were getting, more traffic from Google. So that's when I kind of understand that, people aren't, well, first of all, they're not interested in SEO,
Mhm.
like learning about it themselves, and then they just don't have the time to, kind of dedicate to it for their own website. And I personally love SEO because it's kind of a mix of both the analytical and creative side because there is a lot of data, some like
Mhm.
technical things with SEO, but then there's a lot of creativity with like copywriting and kind of I kind of see it like as a puzzle, like, trying to fit all the pieces together to make sure everything,
Mhm.
works for the business. And every website is different. So kind of like, trying to figure out what works best for the business, what they need, and what they need to, focus on to grow on Google. So that's quite why I love it. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people don't like the data side.
Mhm.
So that's, why a lot of people come to me for that.
So I think you mentioned, all the data and the numbers, and I think that is
Hmm.
something that it does seem like I don't code, I'm not into like that's not
Hmm.
interesting to me, but I do think that it is important to know like if people are finding you. So for many business owners, SEO is like it's sort of overwhelming, like you said, with all of
Hmm.
that information. But why should ranking on Google be a top priority for these business
Hmm.
owners?
Yeah, because if you think about the way that you're currently using Google, you may go there to search for, businesses or services or products or things like that. And you may be in much more likely, more of a mindset to be able to purchase something or hire someone rather than if you go to Instagram and, you might follow an account like an, interior
Hmm.
design account and you just really like, the designs that they're doing, but they might be in a totally different state. So you're not able to ever hire them.
Hmm.
But if you're like searching for interior designer near me, then any interior designers in your location are much more likely to show up, and you're much more in the mindset to be able, to hire them and work with them. So it's kind of, an easy way for people to come to you rather than having to put out the energy on social media for like having to find people yourself.
Do you have any examples of any success stories, whether it's yours or someone else's,
Mhm.
where having a better search ranking actually did unlock
Mhm.
growth for their small business?
Yeah, one client that I recently worked with, actually, she had one business a few years ago and then has pivoted and, changed her business. She is a dog trainer now in
Hmm.
a different location. And she is currently getting 90% of her bookings from Google because people are searching for, dog trainer near me, or they're searching for, different topics related to dog behavior that they're struggling with. And she has, blog post content that's also answering those questions. So if you're kind of able to rank for those, types of keywords that your clients are searching for, or even types of keywords that are answering their questions, that's a really good way to get people onto your website and, turned into leads.
And so I'm curious because I do think that there's a lot of potential growth there. I feel like there's a lot of times where we just wonder like we're doing the right things, we're offering something great. How come people aren't
Mhm.
finding us? How come people aren't like calling? But I do think
Mhm.
there could be a lot that has to do with do you show up? So how would somebody know necessarily? I mean, I don't think that a lot of people Google themselves necessarily a lot,
Yeah.
but you help people with audits of
Mhm.
their
Mhm.
rankings and things like that. What are some things that people, if they maybe feel like, oh, wow, I don't show up anywhere for like
Mhm.
this basic search in my town or things like
Mhm.
that, how do you help people kind of understand like where they're at right now? And, even that basic step in order to like then maybe progress to starting to get
Mhm.
on a earlier page or anything like that when it comes to their local business where people might be looking for them and they're not showing up right.
Mhm. Yeah, so a lot of business owners may have heard about Google Analytics, which tracks a
Mhm.
lot of different types of data for your business. But they also have another tool called Google Search Console, which not as many people are familiar with. But it's totally free and it's very similar to Google Analytics, but it just tracks data specific to how your site is performing on Google. So it's going to show you the keywords that you're ranking for, where you're ranking for those keywords, how much traffic you're getting for those keywords. So that way you can see like what you're currently ranking for, if anything, and kind of how you're ranking. And if you're not ranking for the types of keywords that you want to be, the first step I recommend doing is going to your website and making sure you're actually using those keywords. I hear a lot of times that, like a photographer's, they want to be ranking for like Philadelphia photographer, Philadelphia wedding photographer, something like that, but they don't actually say Philadelphia anywhere on the page, or they don't say like photographer until the footer of the page. So making sure you're very clear with, what you do, the services that you offer, the types of clients that you work with, making sure that is, incorporated within your website copy. And then, I typically recommend trying to incorporate it near the top of the page
Mhm.
for the first time, because Google does read, top to bottom, just like a human does. So if you're able to give the most important information first, that is going to signal to Google that this is the type of, information that you should be ranking for. And this doesn't mean you have to like write like a robot and just like keyword stuff like Philadelphia wedding photographer like 20 times on a page, just making sure that you're incorporating it, naturally, and not, yeah, sounding like AI wrote it.
Mhm.
Because you don't want to turn people away as well. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing on your website is also speaking to your ideal clients and you're not just, yeah, ranking on Google for the sake of ranking.
That's very important because I do think a lot
Hmm.
of websites, like maybe we don't make it, and I've talked to other people about this, other business coaches and stuff about the clarity and making it very
Hmm.
easy for people to understand what you do, how you can help them. And I do think a lot of times, like, when you're when you're looking at a website or you're looking at a recipe and it's like a life story, and then it gets
Yeah.
down to like how to make the chicken parm, like we tend to do that maybe where we want to like not look too salesy or too
Hmm.
pushy, but it might lead to it not being really clear like what you do or how you help people. So
Hmm.
I do think that that mix of clever
Hmm.
copy that's not robotic or like clearly like if it just said like financial planner Massachusetts financial planner like that looks
Hmm.
strange, but trying to build that in so that it can be found I think is super important. And you're right, a lot of times we're like, well, I want to be known for like helping people with executive compensation or things like that, but if it's nowhere
Hmm.
on there, like it doesn't make sense that it would show up, you
Hmm.
would show up for
Yeah.
that. But I do think we
Hmm.
sometimes assume like, well, but that's what I do.
Right.
That's how I help people. So I think that's really important to make sure the copy is good. And I wanted
Hmm.
to talk about AI because I know that
Hmm.
that's something that I mean, it's certainly something that I'm looking at from as an investment advisor, like that end of it, the money and the absolute like the the pace that it's growing at. But in your business, how is it, how is it helpful and how is it hurting and how can people
Hmm.
stand out when things start to sound a little bit more similar for people who are trying to rank in these areas?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think focusing on AI has helped a lot of people when they are ranking, or not necessarily ranking,
Mhm.
or when ChatGPT recommends them, because the more website copy that you're able to have, the more information you're able to give people, the clearer that you are, the more information you're also giving ChatGPT. So when someone is searching for like a lot of times they'll be a little bit more specific with searches with ChatGPT rather than on Google. So you might be searching like, financial planner near me or something like that on Google, but on ChatGPT you might go into like, I'm looking for a financial planner who works primarily with, women-owned businesses or, something like that, or, maybe has services within this price range. If you have all that information on your website, it's both super clear to potential clients that who you work with, what you do, what
Mhm.
your, maybe your price point is, if that's relevant. But then it also gives both Google and ChatGPT, other AI tools, all that information to be able to recommend you more when people have those more like specific searches. And then on the other hand, people using AI tools to like write their website copy and their, blog post content, things like that to rank higher on Google. Google is focusing more on like quality content and not just
Mhm.
like, you know, 500-word blog posts from ChatGPT that you're putting on your website every
Yeah.
single day. If you're able to just like write one high quality blog post a month, that's going to serve you a lot better because, yeah, people are kind of wising up to the generic AI
Mhm.
content. Google does also focus, they want to see like your personal experiences within, your content. Like if you are a wedding planner and saying like, I've worked at these 5 different venues. This is what I love about each of them, something like that, rather than ChatGPT just like regurgitating like these are 5 great wedding venues in your area. Showing that personal experience is both going to, better connect with potential clients, and then also Google likes to see that personal experience, and will rank that more likely than they will the, generic AI content.
You mentioned people searching on ChatGPT. So not just business
Mhm.
owners using it to create the content, but as far as the search engines, I know some people are
Mhm.
searching on ChatGPT, some people are searching YouTube now. Like, is it changing a bit where people are going? I know Google is still
Mhm.
dominant, but
Mhm.
are people looking for answers in lots of different places now? And is the something like keyword, is it universal for all of them? What are you
Mhm.
seeing as far as those changes?
Yeah, so there's definitely been an increase in people searching on ChatGPT for, different services. This is a good way in Google Analytics. You can check to see like where you're getting traffic from. I've seen an increase from ChatGPT on my own
Hmm.
website. I've also started noticing in the last couple months that Bing is bringing me more traffic than Google is.
Okay.
But that, kind of goes to show that like whatever you're doing to optimize your website is going to
Mhm.
help you across all search engines. Like you don't need to be separately optimizing for Google and Bing and any
Okay.
other search engines. So yeah, there are lots of, you mentioned keyword research. There's
Mhm.
lots of keyword research tools that you can use to kind of understand, what the competition level is for different keywords and how many people are searching for those keywords each month. So that way, kind of like what keywords people are searching for and what you can target on your website that you can actually rank for. So something that's not like too competitive that you're never going to have a chance of ranking for. So that way you can incorporate that within your website, and that's going to help you, yeah, again, across all the search engines and Chat GPT. Oh, that one's hard to say so many times. And like any other AI tools that
Yeah.
people are using.
And so if it's not so important to necessarily rank in the most competitive category, it might be better to
Mhm,
stand out in something that's less,
mhm,
searched, but also a little bit less saturated.
mhm.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, so something that would be less competitive,
Hmm.
but this can also help you kind of reach more of, the specific type of clients that you're searching or wanting to work with. So for like financial planner, if you're just trying to rank for financial planner,
Hmm.
that's going to be really competitive. There are tons of different, financial planners across the
Hmm.
country who work with different types of people. But if you say like, financial planner in Philadelphia or financial planner specializing in small businesses or specializing in working with families, something like that. If you're able to get more specific like that, and again, use the keyword research tools to kind of make sure you're not getting so specific that no one's actually searching for that. But the more specific you are able to get, the better chance you're going to have to rank and the better chance you're going to have to reach people who are searching specifically for what you have to offer.
I think, and the more people I talk to in business that are, that have gotten really, really focused on serving a particular, group of people or particular like field, line of work, location. I know
Mhm,
at first with business, it's like, well, I want everybody to find me, and it's like, well,
mhm,
actually, maybe if more people who are perfect for you find you,
mhm.
that could have your website really be one of your strongest people on your team, because it's
Yeah.
working all the time and people can find it. So I do think that that's something that a lot of times is more of a mental thing to say, but I want to rank as financial planner, but
Mhm,
maybe you want to rank, or you want to rank as SEO expert for this type of business because that's your sweet spot. So I
mhm,
think that's an interesting thing to think about and maybe to even understand what people are searching for because we do what
mhm.
we do. I'm
Yeah.
not searching for a financial planner every day. I'm not searching for investment advisors in my town. I just don't because I don't need one. But I also don't know what people are typing in there when they're looking.
Mhm,
So I think that's a really interesting point of getting that kind of research and really
mhm,
looking at it and saying like, oh, they think about it this way when
mhm,
they're changing jobs or anything's happening where they might need you, whatever happen to practice. So very, very interesting. Are there any myths about SEO that kind of frustrate business owners or that confuse them to the point where you kind of have to demystify that piece of what you do?
mhm. Yeah, so I would say, I mean, SEO has changed so much in the last 20, 30 years, um, that there are still a lot of old practices that are like still being recommended, or, maybe people read about them 10 years ago and they just haven't read any updated
Mhm.
information. So things like keyword stuffing, I still see sometimes where back in the day, the more often you use the keyword, Google will be like, oh, this website is really important for that particular keyword. They definitely need
Mhm.
to be ranking number one. So people would actually, take their keywords to like financial planner, and then they would paste it like 30 times at the bottom of their website and change the text to white so that humans
Mhm.
couldn't read it, but
Ah.
search engines could. So things like that, where people like try to game the system or kind of like use these old practices that may have worked 20 years ago,
Mhm.
but Google's kind of like
Oh.
wised up that people are trying to, trick them.
Mm.
So I would say there's a lot of that. Or like, yeah, when AI was first introduced, everyone's like, oh, I can just like, crank out 100 blog posts in a month and then be done with it. And Google has again, they wise up when people are trying to like game the system, and they really try to focus on, ranking the highest quality websites.
So you're saying Google's getting smarter
Yes.
all
Yep.
the time,
Anytime
which is
some,
kind of
yeah,
scary to me. But
I
yes, like
know.
computers are onto us. Like our these tricks do
Mhm,
not work anymore. Um, but I think that's good to know because I think you're right. Sometimes people might have said, "Okay, I learned about this. Like I know what to do," but maybe it's not necessarily the same, and it's kind of evolving as we get more search engines, more kind of more sophisticated technology and things like
mhm,
that. So very important. So yeah, maybe if your old practices aren't working, it might be time to revisit them. And I wanted to ask about, say you do rank and you're getting people in the door. Um, how do you then, coach your clients to help them convert that
Mhm.
traffic or do something with it, especially if, say, they are able to, rank quickly or something becomes a very popular topic and then all of a sudden now people are heading to their website. How do you help them with that conversion piece of it that actually will turn
Mhm.
those searches into money?
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit on website copy, but that is a really important piece of your
Mhm.
website is like speaking to your ideal clients to be, again, very clear on what you do, who you help, and why people should work with you over, your competition or something like that. And then, kind of again goes back to like incorporating keywords on your website. If you're like making sure from the get-go that you're saying that you're a financial planner rather than something like I help people with money, which
Mhm.
could be very general. That can mean a lot of different things. So making sure you're clear from the get-go exactly what you do, how you can help people. Making sure that you have things like a very, clear, easy to navigate menu, both on desktop and on mobile, so that way people can find what they're searching for. Making sure things are very clear on, what they're going to get when they land on a page. So don't get like cute with naming your pages.
Mm.
Just get straight to the point, like, services, or like you can get more specific if you have a few different services. So like financial planning services, accounting services, things like that. But don't just say like, get help with your money. Um, Again, be very clear because
Yeah.
you only have a few seconds to get people to be interested enough to stay on your website to learn more. So making sure everything is easy for them to find, making sure you have, clear calls to actions throughout the different pages that lead to like your services page or to your contact page, making sure it's easy for them to, book a call or, if they just can hire you or purchase a product directly from the website, make sure it's easy to do that. Basically make sure everything's easy.
Yeah.
If you want to kind of like test things out to see if other people are able to, navigate your website as easily as you are, because it can be hard to analyze your own website when you're kind of like in the weeds.
Mhm.
Um, you can like, give your website to, a family member or a friend or something like that who isn't in your business, industry, and say like, hey, how easy is it for you to find the price of this particular service and give
Mhm.
them a little, task and see if they're able to find that quickly or if it is a struggle for them to find or if your site takes a really long time for them to load and it's just kind of like a frustrating user experience. So that we can kind of get an outside perspective on, how people are able to use your website.
So important. And I know it's nerve-wracking to tell somebody to look at something that you spent a lot of
Yeah.
time and money on developing and then be like,
Mhm.
is this good enough? But I think it's so important because like you said, we're in the middle of it. We're looking at it. We
Mhm.
understand all the language. We understand everything that's on there. But does somebody who actually needs to hire you understand all that? And that's really important. I'm curious when say you're somebody who, wants to build content and have like an SEO strategy, what are some ways that you help people build like a sustainable content? Because I've seen some people that like maybe they start a blog and they stop, or they start a podcast and they have one episode. Like, how do you, with that piece of it, what are some of your tips for building that consistent strategy for people that they can maintain?
hmm Yeah, so I would say start off small before you kind of like jump in and say, I'm gonna, blog every single week. Maybe start with one blog a month, and if you're able to kind of like sustain that, then increase it to two times a month, or same with the podcast. Don't try to have a podcast episode twice a week if that's going to be too much for you to keep up with. So making sure you know what you can handle. Maybe set aside time like in your calendar to block or batch a few episodes or a few blog posts. So that way you kind of have things set it for the next month. So you're not kind of like scrambling, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to blog about this month? So kind of like planning ahead, especially if there's anything seasonal with your industry. So like, tax season, making sure that you have your blog posts about tax season up and ready to go in like December before people actually start searching for it, because it does take Google a little bit of time to start crawling and ranking new content. So like just because you put a blog post up tomorrow, it's not going to rank number one immediately. It does take a little bit of time. So you do need to kind of plan ahead with those and think about when people are going to be searching for that. And then, post it 2 months before then. That doesn't mean you have to be like, sharing it on Facebook if it
Mhm.
doesn't make sense to be sharing your tax tips in October.
Yeah.
But at least having it on your website so that way Google can crawl it and it can start ranking before people are actually searching for it. So if there's anything seasonal or, recurring every year that you need to be planning for, kind of get that, on your calendar way before you think you need it.
That's really smart because I think you're right, you can post it, but you don't necessarily have to promote it or start sharing it
Mhm.
to everything right away. But having that content there so it can be found is important. But it's not something that I would necessarily think to do because you write the blog and you're like sharing it because it's kind of
Yeah.
like it's got to go out, everyone's got to see
Mhm.
it. But I think that's a very smart tip, especially for things that are seasonal or maybe evergreen that every year you could kind of refresh that or post those things to make sure that you're still, providing good content, updating it, and continuing to rank. When businesses start to see more traffic, how do you recommend that they measure their success beyond just looking at the number of visitors when they go to that Google console?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest thing you can do is whenever you get someone who like fills out your contact form or books a call with you or, however they get in touch with you, asking them where they found you. So you do want to make sure that you're tracking if they're coming from, Google or, other platforms.
Mhm.
This is also important for, just marketing in general. If you're focusing all of your time on Instagram, but then you're not getting any clients from Instagram, then making sure you're focusing on where you're actually getting your clients from. So that'd be the number one thing is just ask people where they came from, where they, found you. And then making sure that you are also tracking, if those leads actually convert into clients. Because, if you get a bunch of leads from Google, but then they're not actually converting, then, you might want to analyze to see like why people are, finding you, how people are finding you on Google to make sure you're actually targeting the right types of keywords that are going to convert those leads into clients. Analyzing things on your website to make sure it's clear, what you do, who you help, things like that. But yeah, just asking people how they find you is a really good way to start with tracking that.
Yeah, I think that is a great way because it's interesting once I started to do that because I was assuming that people were coming from like websites and it's actually surprisingly like more Facebook and
Mm,
Facebook groups
mhm,
for a certain period of time, which was kind of cool because you might say, oh, but I'm spending all my time on LinkedIn and I wasn't really seeing much
mhm,
traffic from there. So it was interesting to see that where your clients are or where they're actually looking for somebody who can help them and what when that happens to be. So it's good information, you're right, for marketing too, especially if you're spending money on certain things with your marketing dollars and maybe they're limited. So I think that that could be making sure that it's, the most useful. Are there any tips you have for people who might be on a tight budget when it comes to marketing with their business that you think could be something that they could do right away that could help?
mhm. Yeah, so just with SEO, just making sure that you are incorporating keywords, even if you don't have the time to do keyword research or
Mhm,
like, you don't want to pay for a keyword research tool there are lots of, free ones or you can
mhm,
get free trials. But even just making sure that you're very clear with, what you do from the get-go on your website, making sure that you have, clear services and that you're describing your services. You can, if you have multiple services that are, maybe ranking for different types of keywords, you can have different services pages, and so that way each page has a good chance of ranking. This doesn't mean you have to go out and create like 50 services pages,
mhm.
but like if you have two main services that you offer, you can have two different services pages. So kind of like being able to capitalize on being able to rank for different types of keywords and get more people on your website in different ways.
Do you think it's important to list prices on the websites?
I would say it depends on the business. I would say most businesses that I've worked with, it is helpful to list the
Mhm,
prices or even like a starting at price,
mhm,
or this is what, clients can expect to spend on average. There are different ways of phrasing it if you don't want to like have one set price on there. But that way, people know what to expect when they talk to you because that could be a reason why conversions could be
mhm,
lower if people are expecting one price and it's, double that. Um, like a few months ago, just to give an example, I was like looking for a postpartum nutritionist to help me with like
mhm,
my, postpartum meal planning and things like that. And I contacted a few different nutritionists. Most had their prices or like starting at prices on their website, and then one didn't, but I went ahead and contacted her anyway. And it was like 5 times the
mhm,
price of these other nutritionists. And it wasn't really clear, why it was so much more
Yeah.
expensive. Like, if she had on her website, like her service included like 5 times more, or she had more experience, something
Mhm.
like that, then that would have made sense. But then we kind of like wasted time on a call
Mhm.
because she didn't tell me the price beforehand, and then I felt
Mhm.
like I was wasting her time.
More time too.
So yeah, having some sort of pricing information, it might not make sense for every single business, but I would say the majority it can help.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something I've seen as like, website, like do it or no, get them on the
Mhm.
phone, make a conversation. I've seen that kind of advice for people, but I do think that for the most part, most people want to see or at least
Mhm.
have an idea and self-reject or say, okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely like what I'm looking for. Not assuming that, no one's going to be able to afford that, which is
Mhm.
rarely ever true. So
Yeah.
very important things to think of.
And I would
Um,
say don't make people sign up for your email list to get your pricing sheet. I see
ooh,
that sometimes, and if I
mm.
see that, I am definitely not signing up. I'm
Yeah. Oh, that's an
immediately
interesting
like
one.
moving on
Yeah,
to another,
no.
but yeah.
Yeah, you want something of value for that email address, not just like
Yeah.
information that,
Yeah.
yeah, is gate kept there. All right,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I understand like not a good thing, but do you think it is important to have something when people sign up for your email list? Are there any things that you think have like converted well or are good ideas for people who are looking to then, grow their email list and start to nurture
Mhm.
those leads?
I don't have the biggest email list, so
Mhm.
I'm not the biggest expert here. But I would say making sure that whatever like freebie or lead magnet that
Mhm.
you have is something that your client specifically would be interested in. So not like the pricing sheet.
Mhm. Yeah.
But like for example, for a long time I had like some like basic checklist on, 10 things to optimize your website. But that was for I was working with a business
Mhm.
coach, and we kind of talked it through, and she was like explaining how that could attract a lot of people who aren't ready to invest in SEO necessarily. They're just kind of like getting the basic information for themselves.
Mhm.
So like kind of focusing my, freebie on being able to use SEO to convert more clients, that has gotten a lot more signups and a lot more people converting from my email list.
Mhm.
So kind of like instead of just doing the, a catchy freebie that
Yeah.
sounds really good, making sure it's actually aligned with who you want to be working with.
I think that's important because I think for a while I was, when I first started blogging and I thought, okay, like I want to provide content for people who can't afford to work with me
Hmm.
yet and have that be free. But then I realized I was only attracting people that couldn't afford to work with me
Hmm.
yet or didn't want to ever pay to work with a financial planner. And so tweaking that to make sure it was like, no, what's appealing to that person that I
Hmm.
want. And then they'd say like, okay, if I got this for free, imagine what I could get if we work together, like I could learn more. So I think that that's kind of an important thing to think about because it might be logically you might be thinking, okay, well, I'll do this for that person that's at that step, and then of course they'll think of me next. But it's like, no, what are they going to think of right now? And make
Yeah.
sure that that's what you're putting out there. So super important. And before we wrap up, I'm curious, looking ahead, I know we talked a little bit about AI, SEO, user experience. What are some trends that you're seeing that you're either the most excited about or the most interested in as far as this year and this coming up with your clients?
Hmm. Yeah, so one thing I'm seeing a lot with Google like focusing on AI is I'm sure people have seen it if they go to Google and ask like a very basic question. Google is supplying the answer right there rather than like you needing to go to a website. So kind of like getting a bit more strategic with
Mhm.
clients to making sure that they're focusing on that like long form content that people need to go to the
Mhm.
website to get, more information. So not just like what's the date to, submit your taxes by,
Mhm.
but like something that's way more, detailed, that people are interested in actually reading about rather than just getting like a quick answer. Because I think Google's going to be focusing more on keeping people on Google,
Google.
rather than like,
Mhm.
pushing websites first at the beginning of Google, but then,
Mhm.
yeah, just making sure that you have that high quality content that people are actually interested in staying on your website to read more about.
Interesting. All right, Julia. So if somebody has listened and said, yes, yes, I know this is something I need to focus on, but I still don't want to do it myself, how can
Mhm.
they find out more about you and your services?
Yeah, so my website is juliareneeconsulting.com. I do have my prices listed. So if you want to get an idea of the different services that I offer and the different, price points, you can get all that information there.
Mhm.
And you can follow me at Julia Renee Consulting on Instagram, and Julia Renee Consulting on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Julia. Thank you so much for going on the show. I think this is an interesting piece. And I do think, and I've talked to other web designers before, I've talked to other people our websites are very important. I think they are a very important part of our business. Sometimes that's employee number one or number two if we are the only employee at our firm.
Mhm.
And I think it is important to constantly look at them. Nobody wants to see an outdated website. You don't want to show up on page 20 of a Google search because no one's going to get there. So these are really important things to think about and to kind of consider as you build out your marketing strategy where you might be thinking of other things like social media or going viral. This could be the bread and butter to get clients
Mhm.
actually converted and in the door. So thank you, Julia, for sharing your expertise. Yes, go follow her. She has very beautiful her layouts and her websites are they're very nice looking. So I think that she knows what she's doing when it comes to getting people to want to actually stick around on the website and learn more. So thanks again for joining. And thank you everyone for listening. If you'd like to head over to my website, mistylynch.com, you can find other episodes of the podcast, order a copy of the book, or find some other information as far as working with me as a financial advisor or planner. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk again next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.